Every presidency has a public face. The confident smile, the firm handshake, the carefully chosen words delivered from a national stage. This is the image of power we are shown. But behind every public face, there is a private history, a series of events, decisions, and connections that shape the leader we think we know. What if the story you've been told is incomplete? Let's go back to August 16, 2012, Marikana, a name now etched into South Africa's soul. On that day, the dust settled on the bodies of 34 striking mine workers killed by police. It was a moment that shattered the illusion of a post-apartheid nation free from state violence. At the heart of this tragedy was the platinum mining company Lonmin, and on its board sat a very influential man, Cyril Ramaphosa. He was not just a board member, he was a shareholder. In the days leading up to the massacre, emails were exchanged. Communications from Ramaphosa's camp described the miners' protest not as a labor dispute, but as a dastardly criminal act that required concomitant action. Shortly after the police moved in, critics argue these communications directly influenced the state's brutal response. Supporters maintain that any responsibility was indirect, and he was simply trying to de-escalate a volatile situation. But for the families of the men who died, the debate means little. They are still waiting for justice, still waiting for accountability. The end of apartheid was supposed to mean the end of state-sanctioned violence. Marikana proved that was a promise yet to be kept. How did a hero of the anti-apartheid struggle, a celebrated union leader who once fought for the rights of these very miners, become a boardroom billionaire? The transformation of Cyril Ramaphosa is a story of power itself. He transitioned seamlessly from the front lines of the struggle to the heights of corporate South Africa. His business empire grew with significant ties to the very sectors he once challenged, mining and energy. It's the classic journey from activist to elite. But with that journey comes a critical question. When does influence become leverage? When does a seat at the table mean you have a hand in the outcome? The man who once spoke for the people was now a man who spoke the language of profit and loss. Then came the Gupta era, a period that would define an entire decade of South African politics, a time of rampant state capture, where a single family seemed to hold the country's levers of power. Throughout the peak of this crisis, as billions were siphoned from state-owned enterprises, Cyril Ramaphosa was the deputy president. He was second in command. The question isn't whether he was directly involved in the Guptas' dealings. The more unsettling question is about what the country's leadership failed to stop. Power doesn't always leave fingerprints. Sometimes its most damaging form is silence, a failure to act when action is most needed. Was it a strategic waiting game, or was it complicity through inaction? Then the story takes another bizarre turn. Fala. It sounds like something from a spy novel. Millions of dollars in foreign currency allegedly stuffed into a sofa at the president's private game farm. A theft occurs, but it isn't reported to the police for months. When the news finally breaks, it raises a storm of questions. Where did the money come from? Why was it in cash? And why the secrecy? For many South Africans, it wasn't the theft itself that shook their faith. It was the silence that followed, the lack of clear answers from the highest office in the land. Imagine if this had happened to an ordinary citizen. The legal consequences would have been swift and severe. It highlighted a glaring double standard, where the rules that apply to everyone else seem to bend for those in power. Beyond our borders, another set of questions emerges. South Africa's foreign policy has taken a decisive turn. The nation is a key member of BRICS, an alliance that positions it alongside global powers like China and Russia. This alignment isn't just symbolic. We've seen joint naval exercises with the Russian Navy off our coast and major infrastructure deals funded by Chinese loans. Officially, these are strategic partnerships, a way for South Africa to assert its independence on the world stage and pursue its own economic interests. But observers wonder about the true cost of these relationships. Is this a balanced act of diplomacy, or does it represent a quiet shift in influence, tying our nation's future to the geopolitical ambitions of others? When a flag starts to blend with the colors of other nations, you have to ask who is really steering the ship. To understand power, you have to follow the benefits. In any political system, there are winners and losers. So, who profits from the current state of affairs in South Africa? Who benefits when investigations into corruption move at a glacial pace? Who benefits when political stability, even a fragile one, is maintained at all costs? The answer is often those who are already in power and their networks. The real cost is absorbed by the public through failing services, a stagnant economy, and a loss of faith in democracy itself. We often think of corruption as someone stealing money, but that's too simple. Sometimes the most insidious form of corruption isn't about stealing money. It's about stealing accountability. It's about creating a system where no one ever has to answer for their failures. And that brings us to the most frustrating question of all. Why does nothing ever stick? Marikana state capture. Fala scandal creates a firestorm of media attention and public outrage. Investigations are launched, committees are formed, and promises of action are made, and then nothing. The justice system moves with agonizing slowness. Political allies close ranks to protect their own. The news cycle moves on, and the momentum for accountability fades. The reports gather dust on a shelf. This pattern sends a dangerous message. When scandal without punishment becomes the norm, it becomes permission. It signals that those at the top are insulated from the consequences of their actions. creating a culture of impunity that rots a democracy from the inside out. This film doesn't accuse, it documents a series of events, connections, and unanswered questions that surround a man at the pinnacle of power. It pieces together a timeline that stretches from the blood-soaked dust of Marikana to the quiet corridors of global diplomacy. The ultimate question isn't about one man, but about the nature of power itself in South Africa. Why does it so often seem to operate in the shadows? Why does it so rarely answer for itself? The facts have been presented. Now it's up to you to decide for yourself.